Well, welcome everybody. I hope y'all are doing well today. Thank you for joining us for our critical path planning lunch and learn. I hope you're having a great day. My name is Matthew Turnkey with Stone Mill Log and Timber Homes. Got a good presentation for you today. We've got a good group joining us today. Hope everybody can hear me. If at any point in time during the presentation you have a question, you are welcome and feel free to raise your hand on your screen and Dawn can call on you. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you want to just hold your questions till the end, please feel free to do so. And we'll take those questions as they come in after the presentation. So first thing I want to do is talk briefly, bear with me just a minute. I want to talk briefly about our company, a little bit of history. Let me get to my screen. And Stone Mill Log and Timber Homes, we started back in 1974. We're family owned and operated. We've been in business for 46 years. We specialize in the design, fabrication, and construction of log and timber frame homes across the country. We have designed and built over 2,000 homes in our 46-year history. We help clients who are looking to build primary forever homes all the way to weekend vacation getaways and rental properties. So our specialty, our passion, our love is for log and timber frame homes. So if you are interested in a log and timber frame home, this is you've come to the right place. If you weren't sure of who we were, now you know. Hopefully you'll stay and join us. But that is our passion. That is our specialty. I started in 1997 in the business professionally, worked prior to that in some construction capacity down at our plant, doing summer jobs. And when I started in 1997, I started in sales and have been working in sales and marketing and doing some various project management things since that time. So I've been doing this now in my 24th year. So I've worked with a lot of clients. I've worked on a lot of different projects, and I'm just really just honored that so many of you took the time out of your day to spend with us, and hopefully this presentation will be beneficial to you. The goal of the presentation is to educate you guys about critical path planning and to help you understand what critical path planning is and help you determine the different steps that are involved in it, because this is not something that just applies to the construction industry, and it's not something that the construction industry uses exclusively. Critical path planning is something that is widely used across the business platform. So what is it? What is critical path planning? I'm sure everybody has heard of it. And in essence, it's a scheduling method that's used in the construction industry. And again, it's not just the construction industry. A lot of businesses use it. A lot of industries use it. But in the construction industry, it's a scheduling method that's used to determine the time and the resources that go into completing a project. And so it's widely used for its simplicity, its effectiveness. It allows you to determine what resources are going to be needed and how much time to dedicate to those resources so that you can complete a particular project. And what we're talking about in this particular case is a construction project. But before we talk about a construction project, we have to talk about all the other things that are associated with a construction project, because it's not just breaking ground and finish the build. There are things that go into a construction project beforehand, that have to be done in order to get to that point. And so what we're going to talk about first is kind of an overview, kind of a macro overview, a 10,000-foot view to go over some of the different variables, some of the different activities that would be needed to be identified, and some of the just general average timeframes associated. So the first, and these are in order. The first being the design. We're starting from an assumption that everybody already owns the land. And I know that those who are on this call today don't all own land, but that's what the assumption we're going to make. So everybody owns property, everybody's got a piece of land that they are ready to build on. And so now we're going to talk about critical path planning from the point that you own the property and you're ready to go from design to move in. So with design, when we talk about the macro overview, we're going to talk about just some average time frames, and consulting with our design department, Remington Brown, who's our design manager. We were talking about just design process can take on average anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Okay, so that's kind of a general range about how long the design process will take. A 3-month scenario is one where you're starting with probably a standard plan, and you're making some minor changes to that standard plan. And we're going through each round of plans very efficiently, getting plans turned around very quickly in order to be in a position to complete that design. 6 months may be a situation where you are wanting us to design a custom plan from scratch, where we don't have any plans drawn or any elevations drawn, and we're starting literally from ground zero. So that time frame, 3 to 6 months, is a really good ballpark average. Then when you've got the design done, another one of your variables or your activities associated with critical path planning and construction is going to be getting a turnkey estimate. Now, whether that's getting that from a licensed GC or whether that's doing that on your own, a general contractor will typically take 30 to 60 days to do a turnkey estimate. There's a lot of time that goes into a turnkey estimate. You've got to send it out to all the subs. Once the design is in place, send it to all the subs so that they can develop estimates off of those plans. Or if you're acting as your own GC, send it to the subs that you plan to use and have them start estimating it. But as a general rule of thumb, turnkey estimating will normally take about 30 to 60 days. I've seen it take much longer, and I've seen people do it much shorter. So we're just using these as just guidelines. The next thing is, once the design's done, once you have a good faith turnkey estimate that you can take to a lending institution. I was consulting this week with one of our partners at US Bank. Her name is Jen West. And she said from the time that they typically will get the plans, the completed final plans, and the contractor's good faith estimate, they are running about 30 to 60 days right now. And again, that's not indicative of all lending institutions, but US Bank in particular, that a lot of our clients use. That's the time frame that they're on at this moment. So 30 to 60 days there. And then the construction process, this is something that if you go online and start researching the average time frame for construction, you're going to see really some ballparks that are all over the place. And in our industry, when I say our industry, the log and timber frame industry, we typically see about 8 to 12 months as the average time frame for construction. Whereas if you're looking at conventional construction, if you go to the Census Bureau, go to NAHB, you're going to find that that's probably 6 to 10 months on conventional construction, 8 to 12 on log and timber frame construction as an average. So the goal for this whole exercise and looking at this overview, this macro overview, is to start getting just some general ballpark timeframes on how long it takes to develop and complete some of these different activities within the construction process, within what we call the design build process. Because if you don't have a general idea, it's hard to know when you need to start your project. So as we move forward through the presentation, we want to then talk about really the micro, and we want to start getting very drilled down into your particular project and when you want to be in your particular project. Then that way, with critical path planning, you can start to identify which activities need to be completed when and what resources you're going to need to complete those particular activities. And so it's really important to identify those activities along the way. Make sure you have everything accounted for in your critical path planning process. So what we're going to do is we're going to just do a little exercise, and we're going to take, for example, Dawn. She's going to build a house, and she wants to be in the house in the summer of 2022. So that's the move-in date that she wants to be ready. We had talked about our construction process, and what we're going to do is we're going to kind of back into that. So we're going to start from the move-in date and come back to current date, using our different activities and the time frame associated with those different activities to kind of decide or determine when we need to get the project started. So with move-in date of June of 2022 or the summer of 2022, if we look at an average time frame of 8 to 12 months for construction, 8 being kind of a best case, 12 being a average worst case, we're going to need to be starting the process. We're going to need to be permit ready sometime in the summer, beginning to late summer of 2021. So this coming summer, we're in 2020 now, getting ready to be in 2021. In the summer of this coming year, we need to be permit ready to be able to break ground to start our construction project. Before that is the financing stage. And we talked about financing taking somewhere between 30 and 60 days. So if we were slated to start a project sometime in June to August of this coming summer, we would need to be in a position to submit our plans and our good faith estimate somewhere around April of 2021 to our lending institution. If it's going to take them 30 to 60 days to get a construction loan in place, to get a closing done so that you're ready to break ground, because you really wouldn't start the construction project until your loan was closed and they were ready at that point to start dispersing funds to the contractor. So you've got that critical path, you've got that particular activity. Prior to being in a position to submit the plan and the estimate to the lending institution, you would have to be in a position to submit a plan to a GC to get a turnkey estimate. And if a general contractor takes 30 to 60 days on average to do a turnkey estimate, sometime around February of 2021, you would need to have a plan drawn that is either in what we call a preliminary phase or in some sort of check set or finals phase for him to start being able to estimate that project, for him to have enough information to be able to start estimating that project. And then if we look at the time and the activity before that, the critical path before that, which is the starting point of the design, and we said that that takes somewhere on average between 3 and 6 months, then in a best case scenario, we would need to start design work sometime around December of this year. And that would give us somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3 to 4 months to be able to get the plans drawn. Now, with that said, in critical path planning, what you're going to find is that there are certain activities that can happen simultaneously. And it's not always that one has to end before the next one can begin. And when you start looking at some of the software and some of the programs that are available out there, it'll recognize which items, which activities can continue to move on while something else is being done. And there are certain things in critical path planning where you have to complete one step before you can start the next one. So with that said, what I mean by that is, like, if we're doing design work and we get 3 months in and we send a general contractor a set of check set plans for him to start estimating, while he's doing estimating, we can continue on with the drawings. We don't have to wait till the drawings are 100% completed in their entirety for the general contractor to be able to start estimating. In fact, we typically in our process will encourage and recommend people to go into what we call our preliminary design phase. And that gives you enough information, that gives you elevations and floor plans and foundation plan to be able to give to a contractor or subs to be able to start that estimating process. So in critical path planning, things can happen simultaneously. Not everything has to come to a completion before the next thing can start. So that kind of gives us the micro when we start drilling into some of the activities, some of the steps that are associated and the time frames associated with getting a project completed. Now, I will say that within each one of these, especially, and I'm going to highlight the construction process, the construction process will have its own activities and steps within itself. We're talking about critical path planning for an entire project, for basically design all the way to move in, which is going to include things like financing, estimating, design, construction. When you get into critical path planning just within the construction step, there's going to be literally in construction hundreds of steps associated with getting that project completed. So what I would say is, if you're hiring a general contractor, a lot of general contractors will use software like Co-Construct or Procore. There are different platforms, critical path scheduling platforms that general contractors will use to help them through the critical path process and through the scheduling process. Those platforms and those that software is also available to end users themselves, and it's just good. It's a good tool to help you keep everything organized, keep all your dates intact, keep track of all your progress and how everything's going. And that's what a lot of these general contractors will use to make sure that they're staying on task and on time with the project. This next slide is going to just show a particular section, one of many sections in the construction process. And I'm not going to go through this specifically. I just want you to see how critical path planning is set up. And you've got your specific activities. This is a critical path plan or a scheduling program used for the build project, for construction itself. It's got all your different activities associated with your roof, with getting masonry done, with getting roof construction completed, and the time frame associated with those. And you can kind of see how a lot of those items will overlap each other. And in construction, planning and making sure that you stay on top of the subcontractors and make sure that you stay on top of your time frame is critical for being able to finish this project on time. So these platforms, these programs will help you stay organized and stay on time. And they're very effective tools, and they're also very simple tools as well. And that's the beauty behind, critical path planning. Is it's a scheduling method, a scheduling tool that helps you identify the resources and identify the time associated with the different steps to help you complete that project. So that hopefully gives you a visual, and that's the other thing too with critical path planning, is this is a visual resource. It is something that you can use throughout the project to see where you stand, make adjustments along the way, and keep the project on track, making sure that you can foresee anything that might be coming along. If I've got masonry needing to start in 30 days and the subcontractors that are needing to be completed before that masonry can begin are not completed, then I can make the adjustments in my schedule to account for that, and then everything will follow suit. Everything will be adjusted accordingly based on that time frame. So, a couple of final remarks before we open up the floor for questions and answers. The first one is just be careful. We looked at the kind of the macro overview and we were using some ballpark averages. I would just say be careful to use averages in your critical path planning. You know, planning is going to be ultimately one of the keys to a successful build project, but you want to identify particular timeframes from your specific project. Don't use averages because every project is going to be a little bit different. If we take, for example, a client that we have down in Mississippi, started with a standard plan, made very few changes, they're going to have a much shorter time frame going into the build process with design work than somebody else who might be designing a custom plan. A custom plan will typically take longer. One of the other things that you got to be careful of is that thankfully a lot of our clients don't finance. They pay cash for the build. And so with that in mind, you take away that whole 30 to 60 day time frame for financing and not having to do a construction loan. But for those who are doing a construction loan, you want to talk to your lending institution and ask them how long it will take to complete the closing for the project to be able to put you in a position to be ready to start construction. Because lending institutions are different. Some will take 45 to 60 days and some may take 30. So just make sure you ask those specific questions. If you're going out to a general contractor and you're asking or wanting to know how long it's going to take for the turnkey estimate, just ask the question so that you can put a correct and accurate time frame into your schedule. The second item is make sure you understand all the different variables that go into your project. Like I said, if you're not financing, that's not going to be a variable for you to figure into your critical path schedule. If you've got a standard design and you don't foresee making a whole lot of changes, then that's certainly a variable that might not take 6 months. It may only take 2 or 3 months, and you might be able to get through that phase or that step of the project a lot faster. The third item, and I can't stress this one enough, is just be disciplined and vigilant in maintaining your schedule. If you're going through construction and you're serving as your own GC and you're trying to keep a very vigilant schedule and a very vigilant time frame, if you have any delays, make sure that you adjust those along the way, because that will start to domino, if you're not keeping up with it. And so just make sure that you're being very disciplined about keeping up with your time frames. And when you're getting to some of these critical path points in your schedule, if you don't hit them, make sure you make those adjustments down the line. Otherwise, you won't hit your target as I'm sure you would hope to. And then the last is just update that schedule as needed. If you miss a mark, update that window to make sure that you've got a clear picture. There are certain things with lending institutions. The reason that critical path planning is important is a bank, for example, a lot of times in a construction loan, they're going to give you 12 months to complete construction. When you pull a building permit, typically that building permit is good for 12 months. Now, there are ways to extend that. You can extend that with either an additional fee, or in the case of financing, you can do some additional fees in order to extend that. But banks don't like going beyond that 12-month period. Building codes departments will issue a building permit typically that's good for 12 months, and then you have to pay either a fee or a penalty to be able to extend that. So know what those time frames are. Be careful to use averages. Make sure that you plan everything way ahead. Planning is extremely important. And then just be very disciplined and vigilant when you're maintaining that schedule.